Good morning, all of you. I welcome you all to Ansarkari. So, in this video, we are going to discuss the important news articles for 12th of January 2023. So, firstly, we see that our Vice President says that court cannot dilute the Parliament's sovereignty. So, he says that he does not subscribe to the idea that judiciary can strike down the amendments which are passed by our legislature on the ground that they violate the basic structure of the constitution. So this is his personal belief, and this cannot. He said that this has not happened elsewhere in the world, and how can Parliament's sovereignty be compromised? So, given this, that he says that how can Parliament's sovereignty be compromised? So the debate is between Parliament's sovereignty and the judiciary. However, we can say that we are not compromising with the Parliament's sovereignty because Parliament has a complete freedom and it is going ahead with the amendments that are required in the Constitution and coming up with new legislations. And at the same time, it is the duty of the judiciary to assess and to analyze that the laws and the amendments, they are not ultra vires the Constitution. So that is, we can say, it is not leading to any violation of Parliament sovereignty. And he also says that can the power of Parliament to amend the Constitution be dependent on any other institution? So, how is it dependent? It is just that judiciary is fulfilling its own obligations and Parliament is going ahead with the required amendments on timely basis as per the requirements. So I don't feel that there is any clash, or we can say that Parliament sovereignty is being compromised. And we know that in India we have constitutional superiority, constitutional supremacy. So we cannot say that if Parliament amends the Constitution and there is no possibility that it can violate the basic structure of the Constitution. So it is the responsibility and the duty of the Indian judiciary to check and to interpret those laws and to ensure that they are not violating anybody's fundamental rights, they are not violating any, we can say, provision and the principle that are enshrined in our constitution, because we follow the constitutional supremacy. Then he says that striking down of the National Judicial Appointments Commission Act as a case of judicial overreach. So when we talk about judicial overreach, so the idea behind, or how do you identify a judicial overreach instance, is that the cases or the issues which are not taken up by the Parliament, which are not addressed by the Parliament, are taken up by the judiciary. And that's how we can say that the legislative acts are now fulfilled by the judiciary, and that's how we term that the case can be a possibility of judicial overreach. But striking down the NJAC and saying that it is an instance of judicial overreach is also, we can say, cannot be completely accepted, because the Supreme Court found that it is violating the Constitution, it is violating the basic structure of the Constitution, and then it was held invalid. And it was obviously the Supreme Court gave its judgment into 2015 regarding the NJAC, and it upheld the working of the collegium system. So a vice president, he does not agree with the existing collegium system. He does not support that. And he says that as the Parliament came up with NJAC, so that should have been the thing functioning and appointing and recommending the High Court judges. And talking about this basic structure doctrine, so this was for the very first time it was identified by the Supreme Court, and in the case of Nand Bharti case of 1973, which we all must be knowing that it was a landmark judgment. And in what it was in this case that the basic structure or the fundamental architecture of the Constitution was identified. So even when we talk about the basic structure of the Constitution, the elements, what all elements they constitute a basic structure, there is no fixed definition of what is the basic structure, but we can say the soul of our Constitution can be said is the basic structure. And With time, the Supreme Court interprets and it identifies what all elements can be a part of the basic structure of the Constitution. So we do not have a defined list of the basic structures. So anything that is fundamental, that is very important for the functioning of our parliamentary democracy, becomes the basic structure of the Constitution. Then moving to the next article, which is that government is providing a financial incentive for banks to promote the digital payments. Now, why the government is providing the financial incentive is that when we talk about the digital payments that are carried out using the unified payments interface, that is UPI payments, and the digital payments through RuPay cards, they do not have the merchant discount rate applicable on them. So firstly, you should be knowing that what is a merchant discount rate. So it is a commission on the digital transactions which are paid by the merchants to the banks. So in the case of UPI and RuPay transactions, the MDR is not applicable. So because of this, this is, we can say, a worry which raises questions about the sustainability of building digital payments infrastructure. And obviously, banks, they need some amount of payment, some amount of finances to maintain this and to construct such an infrastructure so as to ensure a healthy, we can say, financial environment which boosts and which promotes such digital payments. And when we look at this graph, we can see that the number of digital payments, they are increasing, and they have increased by 23% in the financial year 2021-22. And one key border road project, it is likely to be scrapped, because when we see the developments regarding this project, which is there in the state of Mizoram, we see that in the past 2 years, not even a meter of road has been constructed. And you should be knowing that it falls under the Ministry of Development of Northeastern Region. So this ministry has awarded the contract to the BRO more than 2 years ago, but there has been no progress, and not even a meter of road has been constructed so far. Then here in this picture, you can see that Magh Mela, it is being celebrated in Prayagraj, that is the earlier Allahabad in Uttar Pradesh. And here people, they take holy dip at the confluence of Ganga and Yamuna, and also the mythical Saraswati River. So it is being celebrated, and you can see the tents where pilgrims, they are staying. Then a few days back, we discussed about the Bepor boat, which comes from the state of Kerala, and it is also known as Uru. So it has been applied for the GI tag. And here, what is important for us is to know that it comes from Kerala. Then talking about the JJ rules, so the rules, they authorize extracting confession from the children. This is what the Delhi Commission for the Protection of Child Rights has to say, and it is approached the Delhi High Court challenging the constitutionality of certain clauses of this Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Children Model Rules of 2016, alleging that these clauses, in essence, they authorize extracting a confession from a child. So this leads to violation of their fundamental right under Article 20, Clause 3, which is about protecting one from being compelled to be a witness against themselves. And it also leads to violation of Article 14 and Article 21 of the Constitution. Then talking about wildlife, so here we see white tufted royal butterfly, which comes from Kerala, and it is protected again under the Schedule 2 of the Wildlife Protection Act. And the species has been spotted in Agastya-Kudam in 2017 and in the Shendroni Wildlife Sanctuary in 2018. So it is there in the state of Kerala. And then again, we see that in Godavari estuary, it has become prime habitat for the Indian skimmer. So the Godavari estuary in Andhra Pradesh, it has become a prime and safe habitat for the Indian skimmers, and you can see them in the picture. And The Bombay Natural History Society has said this, and basically, we can say this has been identified under the Asian Waterbird Census of 2023, and it is there in the endangered red list of the IUCN. So the IUCN status for Indian skimmer is endangered, and they are in the southern part of the Kurringa Wildlife Sanctuary. So it is there in the Andhra Pradesh, and so all these locations and the wildlife sanctuaries, it becomes important, plus the IUCN status of these species. Then talking about the twin challenges regarding preterm births and the stillbirths. So when we look at what are the challenges and what are the possible solutions that we need to implement regarding the twin challenges in India, we'll be discussing about all that in this article. So firstly, we'll be starting about with the saying of Nelson Mandela, sir. So he said that there can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children. And recently, a report on child mortality that is named as Levels and Trends in Child Mortality, which is released by United Nations Interagency Group for Child Mortality Estimation, it estimates that globally around 5 million children, that is 50 lakh children, they have died before their fifth birthday, and that was in year 2021. And talking about the situation in India, so the India's share in these child mortalities was estimated at approximately 7 lakh under 5 deaths, approximately 6 lakh infant deaths, that is the children dying before their first birthday, and approximately 4 lakh and 50,000 neonatal deaths. So many of these are preventable. So we need to ensure, we need to take certain steps, and we'll be discussing what steps can be taken to deal with these twin challenges. So the first challenge is of children which are being born too early, which are known as preterm births, which means that they are born alive before 37 weeks of pregnancy is completed. And globally, 1 in every 10 births is preterm, but in India, 1 in every 6 to 7 births is preterm. So India has a high burden of preterm births. And the second challenge is of stillbirths. So a baby who dies anytime after 22 weeks of pregnancy, but before or during the birth, is classified as a stillborn, and we demand urgent intervention. So we see that one of the reasons why the preterm births and stillbirths, they do not get due attention is because of the lack of granular and the reliable and the micro level, micro scale data which is absent. So this is the one thing because of which we are not able to pay due attention to these two challenges. And talking about the proven solutions, so we can go ahead by scaling up the known and the proven interventions and improving the quality of health services. So what all it includes: increasing the access to family planning services, improving antepartum services such as health and nutrition, including the intake of iron, folic acid by pregnant mothers, providing counseling on the importance of a healthy diet and optimal nutrition, then identification and management of the risk factors, then measures to prevent, detect early, and manage the diseases which put mothers at high risk, such as diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and infections, is required. So we need to first prevent these diseases like diabetes, hypertension, and obesity. Prevent, detect them early, and then manage all of them so that there is no risk to the life of the baby. And also the interventions, they can be best delivered if we have a data on the preterm births and stillbirths, if they are better recorded and reported also. So we need to also identify the hotspot clusters of the stillbirths and preterm births for local and targeted interventions. And talking about the National Health Policy of 2017, the government had committed to investing almost 2.5% of the GDP on health by 2025, but still we only see a marginal increase by the government, and we can say that as of now it is around 1.5% of the GDP. So that definitely needs to go up. And the government's investment on health is among the lowest in the world when we talk about the case and the situation in India. So we discussed about what is the problem. We used the data. Then we looked at what are the possible and the proven solutions that can be carried out, and also talked about the national health policy and the target which the government set, but it is still not yet, we can say, very close to achieving that target. So that needs to be fulfilled because it is one of the most important thing that will help us in tackling with these twin challenges. Then talking about China and Afghanistan. So recently they have signed approximately $540 million worth of deal where Beijing will get access to the Amu Darya basin in northern Afghanistan. So we see that, talking about the relationship between China and Afghanistan. So, for China, keeping Afghanistan and Central Asia out of the reach of the West, it has been a critical strategic aim. But we can see that because of the Russia-Ukraine war, we are seeing that US is participating and it is coming ahead in support of Ukraine. So, as of now, we can say that China has not been successful in keeping the West away from Afghanistan and Central Asia. And talking about the economic aspects, so economically, China's approach to Afghanistan would have Pakistan also at the center. So China would like to take both Afghanistan and Pakistan together, and so that both the states, they are tied to larger projects such as China's Belt and Road Initiative and China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So China would try to balance both of these, like Pakistan and Afghanistan together, through ensuring that its larger projects reach such countries and it's able to earn some goodwill. And however, the rapid deterioration of the security situation between Taliban and Pakistan can be one of the challenges for China in order to achieve the aim, because we few days ago we talked about the rise of the activities of Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, and this can be one of the challenges for China. And China, it has a checkered record of running investments and businesses in politically volatile regions from afar. And if Beijing, it was hoping to run its economic strategy in Afghanistan through a blank checkbook and an economically unstable Pakistan, which is facing severe political and strategic headwinds, it may now need a rethink. So this is one thing, and the success or the failure of this oil deal, it could determine the future of Afghanistan-China cooperation. So we need to look at how this deal functions and how whether it works out or not. Then a slowdown in India's financial growth, says World Bank. So India, however, it is expected to be the fastest growing economy of the seven largest emerging market and developing countries. And we have already discussed a lot about this Joshimat issue and what are the possible reasons behind this. And moving ahead. So Ukraine war, it has left nations with rising debts. So with the Ukraine conflict, it is entering the second year because it started last year around end of the February month. So India it will focus on the substance and not the symbolism of the outcomes at the G20 summit. This is what the chief coordinator, that is Harsh Vardhan Shringla sir, has to said. And so we are also going to host the Global South Summit, and Ukraine conflict that had left the developing world with mounting debts, lower revenues, and higher import bills would be an agenda at the Global South Summit. And also we see that there are lower revenues from decreasing international demand for goods and services, because globally the growth is slowing down, and also there is lower remittances for many developing countries. However, for India it is not a concern, and also it's a concern for the countries who depend upon the remittances and tourism, and who are also like at the same time they are not seeing good growth in their remittances inflow. So all of this is going to be on agenda in the Global South Summit. Then hold special de-radicalization sessions in the jail. So this is what our Home Ministry has asked the state prison authorities, and this will help. With the help of this, we'll be able to take some correctional and behavioral we need to take the help of some correctional and behavioral experts who can help in bringing a change in the mindset of the misguided criminals. So for that, it will be basically majorly focusing upon bringing a change in the mindset of the misguided criminals. And prison is a state subject, so states right now they follow the model prison manual of 2016. So most and we need to try that more and more number of states follows these rules, so that there is a uniformity in the basic principles governing the prisons of the country. So that is another aspect. And talking about the criteria that is used to define the scheduled tribes. So we see that recently an RTI that was filed. So from that, we come to know that the Office of Registrar General of India is following the set of criteria that was set out by the local committee nearly 60 years ago to define any new community as a scheduled tribe. So here, what is important for us is that the approval of the Office of the Registrar General of India is mandatory for the inclusion of any community on the scheduled tribe list as per the procedure for the scheduling tribes. But obviously, we need a reform. We need to update the criteria that we are using, because we are using a criteria that is 60 years old, and definitely the situation is different today. It has changed comparing to the situation that existed 60 years ago. So that is also, or we need to take that thing also into consideration. Then 3 multi-state societies have been formulated, and that will be focusing on procuring and distributing the seeds. So a union cabinet has approved the setting up of 3 national level multi-state cooperative societies to act as an apex body for procurement, processing, marketing, and distribution of the seeds. So you need to know this: procurement, processing, marketing, and distribution. And the societies, they would help in protecting the indigenous natural seeds which are becoming extinct. So that is also going to be one of the benefits out of them, and they are being formed under the Multi-State Cooperative Societies Act of 2002. Then here you should be knowing that Soyuz MS-23 is being launched by Russia. So that is the only thing that becomes important for us to know. And in Bangladesh also, we are seeing people are protesting and demanding resignation of the prime minister because of rising food and fuel cost and the prices in the country. So people are protesting, they are on streets. And talking about the government's revenue from the direct tax, so we see that the personal income tax revenue, it is grown faster than the net corporate taxes. And also a few days back we discussed about the share the share of the corporate tax, income tax, and GST when we talk about the government's total tax revenue when we were discussing Financial Express. So in that we saw that GST has the highest proportion, then it was followed by corporate tax and then income tax. But now we are seeing that the personal income tax revenues, they are growing faster than the corporate tax. And we see that the collections, India's net direct tax collections, they stand at rupees 12.31 lakh crores, and they account for almost 87% of the target for 2022-23. And combined with the securities transaction tax, the personal income tax collections, they have climbed 21%. And talking about the growth rate of the corporate tax, so it is 18.3%. Now we'll take up the Financial Express. So in Financial Express, we have important data to be discussed, and this is regarding the terms that we also discussed one day regarding the union budget. So we had discussed the meaning and the definition of all the terms that are relevant and that are, we can say, related to the union budget. And today we are going to see the data regarding them and their trend and how they are performing. So firstly, we'll be looking at the quality of the fiscal spending. So firstly, we see that the quality is improving, and we are also seeing a decline in the revenue deficit as a percentage of the fiscal deficit. So here, what is important to understand is that we are comparing it, or we are seeing it in the perspective or in comparison with the fiscal deficit and not the GDP here. So but again, at the same time, it is good that the revenue deficit as a percentage of fiscal deficit is declining. So we saw that when we talk about revenue expenditure and the capital expenditure. So with capital expenditure, we see that assets, they are created which are important for an economy's GDP's growth, but that is not the case when it comes to the revenue expenditure. So the government, as we say, it needs to reduce and it needs to rationalize on its revenue expenditure, and we are seeing that, be it because of the decline in the revenue expenditure or an increase in the revenue receipts, the revenue deficit has declined. So when we look at the figures, it was at 79.3% in financial year 2021, and it is now at 59.3%. So revenue deficit has declined. Then looking at this bar diagram, we see that the green color is showing the performance of the fiscal deficit. So even fiscal deficit has declined. It was at 9.2% in financial year 2021. Now it is at 6.7%, and revenue deficit has also definitely declined as a percentage of GDP also. So right now it is at 4.4%, and earlier it was 7.3. So both the things, they are declining. And then we talk about the gross tax revenue and the net tax revenue. So we'll be looking at the net tax revenue, that is the dark blue color. So that is, we can say, it is marginally, it is increasing. So it was 7.2% in financial year 2021, increased to 7.7%. And then we see that the expenditure, so in case of expenditure, the total expenditure as a percentage of GDP, so we see the light blue color is showing up the performance of the total expenditure. So even total expenditure, it is at 16% right now, and revenue expenditure, we can say, is the dark blue color. So that has declined, which was 15.6, and now it is at 13.5%. Talking about the capital expenditure, so it has definitely increased. It was at 1.7, increased to 2.2, then to 2.5. So that is increasing. And subsidies, so subsidies has declined. And so all these things are pointing towards the progressive developments and the things, how they are moving ahead. And then we're talking about the public debt. So public debt, when we look at the share of the center, so we see the light blue color is showing the share of center and the performance of the public debt. So center may, it has definitely increased because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it was at 52.7%, and it grew to 63.3%, and then marginally it has declined to 62.6%. And when we talk about the states, so even in states, it is at around 31%, and the total of it is at 89%. So we need to reduce this thing, because obviously this is very huge as of now, and the reason we know is because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we talk about the non-debt capital receipts. So in case of non-debt capital receipts, their size is almost at around 0.2%. So this is a very important data, and it is also important at the same time that only if you are able to understand and you are able to comprehend this data, then only it will going to benefit you. So you can pause this video, and once again you can have a look at the entire data on your own. Then a prime minister says, and even we looked at the statement that was coming from the IMF, which said that according to IMF, it sees India as a bright spot in the global economy. So India is definitely is in a better position to deal with the global headwinds and the challenges than many other countries in the world right now, given we have a very strong macroeconomic fundamentals, plus our domestic growth is also supporting the GDP. So he said that optimism for India is driven by its strong democracy, young demography, and political stability. So, all these are keywords, you can use them in your answers. And India is taking decisions that boost the ease of living and ease of doing business. So, that is definitely a good thing for India. And moving ahead, so when we talk about the world's most powerful passport, so it goes to Japan and followed by Singapore and South Korea. And looking at India's rank, so it is at 85. So Japan has been, we can say, one of the world's most powerful passport, which allows visa-free entry to 193 global destinations. And this is as per the Hanley Passport Index. And the country has been topping this index for 5 consecutive years. So that is an achievement for Japan. And I know if someone asks you the question, so the answer that will be coming to your mind would be USA, but it is Japan, and we cannot look at the rank of USA in the data that is given. So, and talking about the cost of living crisis, which is the biggest global risk. So, in this diagram, it is very nicely shown that the biggest global risk, they are now emerging from the environmental sector. Earlier, although we had two challenges or risk from the technological sector in 2019, which included data fraud or theft and cyber attacks. But now, when we look at the situation in 2022 and in 2023, so we see that the first biggest global risk is because of the climate action failure to mitigate the climate change. And next up, we have extreme weather. And thirdly, we have biodiversity loss. So all these are related to environmental factors. So these are the biggest global risks. Followed by, we have the societal risk, so which includes the social cohesion erosion. We have livelihood crisis, and there is large scale involuntary migration. So all these are, we could say, the biggest global risks in today's time. So you should be knowing about this, and it becomes very important. Then lastly, we will take up one more article from Financial Express, which is regarding hydrogen. So firstly, we'll look at how the different types of hydrogen are produced, be it green, gray, or blue hydrogen. So fossil fuel feedstocks such as the natural gas, LPG, and naphtha, they are mixed with steam to produce the synthesis gas, which is also known as the syngas. So it involves natural gas, LPG, and naphtha mixed along with steam. So it is a mixture of carbon monoxide and hydrogen. So further, when we refine, it produces gray hydrogen. And there is another way to make gray hydrogen, that is partial oxidation of refinery residues. So blue hydrogen, it is also derived from the same fossil fuel sources, but with the involvement of carbon capture usage and storage. So the carbon that is released, it is captured and it is stored. So this is the only difference that we can say between the production process of gray hydrogen and blue hydrogen. But gray and blue hydrogen, they use either the steam methane reforming process or the autothermal reforming process. And talking about green hydrogen, so we know that it is the most environmentally benign version of the element in the industrial scale, and it is produced by electrolysis, by which we split water molecule into elemental hydrogen and oxygen using the electricity that is generated from renewable sources. So since we use electricity that is generated from renewable sources, that's why we call it green hydrogen, and it does not leads to any release of greenhouse gases. And talking about the industrial uses of hydrogen, So it can produce energy without causing greenhouse gas emissions, and it can be used as fuel cells in electric vehicles and even in trains. And also we can say this makes it potentially viable transportation fuel, and also a feedstock for production of ammonia, and it can also be used in steel and oil refining industries. So that's all for today. Thank you for joining Ansarkari, and you'll get the PDF link in the description box. So definitely go through the PDF also, and do not forget to subscribe to Ansarkari, hit the like button, and share this video as much as possible. Thank you again for joining us.